Welcome to the Rattles Weekly Wraps. I'm Viv Govender, and as usual, what we'll do is we'll start off with some macro general market news and end up with a segment on AI tech. In our macro segment this week, we're going to cover political turmoil in France and South Korea, as well as the disappointing GDP numbers from South Africa. And in our tech segment, we're going to do a bit of a wrap up on OpenAI and some of the news that's come out on the company in the last week or so. So let's start off with the political turmoil in South Korea. There was a brief period this week where the Korean president basically declared a state of emergency / martial law in South Korea. It lasted for just over a couple of hours before it was being effectively crushed by both political opposition from the parliament as well as popular protests on the streets. This was possibly caused, according to the president, due to subversive elements within the Korean government that prevented him from doing his job properly, and therefore he felt that was the only way to basically achieve what he needed to achieve. He had to declare a brief period of martial law. However, I think that historically that's never a good argument. If you cannot achieve something politically without the democratic support of the country, then basically it's not up to you to decide what's in the best interest of the government or the country or not. You don't have the right as the leader of the country to decide that. You have to have the work through at least the political system that you were elected into. Now, the government, unrest did spook the markets a bit, but not as much as you would think, considering state of emergency, deposition of impeachment of the president, etc., which is likely to come. I think that what kind of makes this make sense is the fact that South Korea has had a much more volatile political history than many people appreciate. We always think of South Korea as being things like Samsung, Kia, Hyundai, etc. These big, powerful, well-run companies that produce incredible things, and therefore you assume that this is a stable country that has a stable democracy, etc. That's not true. South Korea's democracy is not that much older in real terms than South Africa's democracy. You can have to go back to the 1980s and you'll find some serious anti-government protests that resulted in maybe over 1,000 deaths, 2,000 deaths in some cases. There's a massacre that occurred in 1980 that some people say killed as many as 2,500 people. The government says it was 160 people. Even 160 people is still a large number, and they have that 40 years ago or 44 years ago. They've also had numerous presidents basically leave office in disgrace. There's been a death sentence. There's been multiple imprisonments. People have committed suicide. The South Korean president that leaves office and basically goes into a peaceful retirement is rather the exception than the rule. And so, it kind of makes sense from that point of view that they know that they've had done stuff in the past, and yet the economy still continues to grow, and they've had a stable, country overall. And so I think that kind of, to a certain extent, helped them through this particular period. The next one we have is France. France, basically, for those that don't know, recently the government lost a no confidence vote, meaning that they are basically going to have to reform. And the reason for this is quite simple. France has a huge issue with its budget. It spends a huge chunk of its GDP, more than half, almost 60% of its GDP, on the government. That's unsustainable going forward, especially when you consider the fact that demographics are going to work against them. People are going to get older, fewer workers in Africa. The slow growth rate we've seen in France versus a place like the US obviously means that the economic growth is not at a rate that they can basically sustain some of the spending that they're doing. And so they had to make some changes. They had to raise the retirement age. They had to reduce some government spending on services and so on, in order to basically get their books to kind of balance, even though it doesn't balance at the moment, but get it a bit better. Obviously, when you do something like this here, you have huge backlash. And in France, they have a history of actually protesting that's stronger than other parts of the world, or most other parts of the world. And therefore, when they did this, they had things like the Yellow Jacket protests a few years ago, etc. Now, what happened in this particular case is that Emmanuel Macron is trying to get the budget looking a bit, better. He's basically over time had all these little, or significant rather, reforms come into place to kind of save money, to kind of spend less, etc. That's caused a bit of a backlash to go against him, both the right and the left. And what happened in this particular case was the right and the left coordinate together to kick him out, or to not kick him out, but to kick out the government. He's still in power. He's out of election for a while, but his government has fallen. The government that he had basically had in place was trying to pursue a budget that has been done by the end of the year. And now that they basically have fallen, we're going to have a budgetary issue coming to the next year for the French. It's not the case like in the US, where if they don't have a budget, they are going to basically not have the ability to pay anything. The French have a workaround on it, but the workaround is basically you get like paid every month. Each department gets paid every month what the last budget says, and you pretty much have to make do with that. That's obviously not a way to actually run a country, but that's what they have going at the moment. The problem right now is that the French seem unwilling to do the things that are required to get their budget under control. And if this continues, it really puts in danger to some of the EU kind of cohesion that we have at the moment. Because the EU has a monetary union, that means they all share the same currency, but they have different budgets. The French have a budget, the Germans have a budget, etc. The way they worked around this was saying that everybody must keep within certain rules for the budget in terms of how much they can spend versus how much they bring in. So they must have a maximum government deficit, about 3% or so. The French like double that at the moment. That means that if the French basically are unwilling to cut back on spending and their budget deficit remains quite high, they, in a normal situation, would experience a weakening in the currency. But because they are part of the EU, it doesn't happen. And therefore, they risk dragging the whole EU down a bit because they are the one that's basically cheating on the rules. This obviously needs to be resolved, and we'll see what the situation is going forward. The market is reacting by basically pricing French bonds at a higher risk rate than they are German bonds. And then finally, in the general market segment, you look at South Africa's GDP numbers. We had a surprise fall in GDP in the last quarter in South Africa, driven down primarily by agriculture. If you look at the agriculture number, then the overall number looks pretty much like what we're going to expect. There's a slight improvement. But you add in the agriculture number, which is like, you show like a 30% almost fall in GDP, in agriculture production in the last quarter, and you have a negative number. Now, agriculture is not a huge sector in the South African economy. I mean, things like government services and financials, even manufacturing are larger. But if you drop any sector of any reasonable size down by 30%, it's going to affect the overall economy. And that's what's happened here. The blame for this was put on a drought. And the one thing I want to note about these drought things is that people talk about, unforeseen events like droughts, like natural disasters, so on. I think that going out to the future, we have to be more willing to anticipate these kind of unforeseen kind of natural disasters regarding weather. Climate change is real. It's going to affect the weather patterns that have been established for, say, hundreds, if not thousands of years. And what's going to happen in that scenario is that if, for instance, you look at the last, say, 50 years in South Africa and say, this is what the rainfall is expected to be, well, that's not quite what you can expect, reasonably expect to be the same case next 50 years, because the climate's going to be different. And if you're looking at a situation like farming, which depends not just on not too much of something, but not too little of something as well. They want too much rain, they want too little rain, they want, not too much sun, they don't want too little sun, all those kind of factors together. You have to come to the conclusion that farming and agriculture overall is going to be more volatile going forward than it is right now, just because we are going to be seeing more, unusual weather events, because climate change is going to be affecting these things. And finally, we move on to the AI segment, which is the focusing on OpenAI. Now, OpenAI has come out with an announcement that they're going to have 12 days of AI, no, OpenAI rather. And they are going to give an announcement every day, which is going to be basically, some of them say they're going to be stocking stuffers, that means very minor things, and others are going to be more significant events. The first one that they announced so far, has been a huge, step up in terms of pricing for the upper end models. They basically are coming out and pricing the highest end package that they're offering to people at about $200 per month. That's about just 4,000 rands per month. Now, the current package is about $20 a month. That's 1/10 the price. And why they're doing this? It's because the new technology they have right now operating works better the more computing power you put into it. So instead of asking you to think about something once, you say, think about it for repeated times, cycling through the system repeated times. And that has been shown to give you better results. Now, in terms of OpenAI's business model, I don't think this is a ridiculous thing to do. Because if AI is going to be so influential in your business going forward, spending, say, a few $100s a month as opposed to a few tens of dollars a month will be not a difficult thing to do. Obviously, the AI has to actually have an impact on your life that's reasonable to justify that, but we believe that it's going to happen going forward. And so these packages, these $200 packages, are not going to be the end of things. I foresee a future when we might have $20,000 packages, $200,000 packages, $2 million packages. Because if AI is going to be such a game changer in terms of like providing, decision-making facilities, etc., paying, say, a couple $100,000 a month for the smartest, something smarter than any human being in the world, that's not, out of the realm of what you might want to do, especially if you're a large company where each decision makes a huge impact on your bottom line. So yeah, I do think that this is an interesting model going forward. The other things I expect coming out from OpenAI over the next couple of weeks are going to be particularly like the sort of model, which is the video model. I think that's probably going to be one of the big items out there. We might also possibly be getting the next update to the general model as well, the LLM model. I don't know if it'll be GPT-5 or not, but we expect GPT-5 in the next few months, before the middle of next year. And now might not be too soon to expect GPT-5 to come out. Another thing that's happening in OpenAI at the moment is that they're being sued by Elon Musk to prevent them from converting into a for-profit company. Currently, they are non-profit. That means they're virtually a charity. But if you have you want to make money, you want to get paid big bucks, etc., and you want to take advantage of these $200 per month, subscriptions in terms of making, a payment or something for yourself, you want to be a for-profit company. Elon Musk is complaining because Elon Musk helped found OpenAI and funded it initially. So this is like, for instance, you go out and you basically give somebody to do a charity and then find out that they use that money as seed to start a business. That's obviously not correct. And so that's what he's suing about. Whether this lawsuit will be successful or not, I don't know. But I do know that he does have a reasonable case here. And if he does manage to basically stop OpenAI's expansion, conversion from a not-for-profit charity to a for-profit, like a normal company, it will have a huge impact on their ability to raise funds going forward. Because they just pay like tens of billions. And the only way to do that is to basically reward people that give their money with shares, future earnings, etc. If they are going to make a not-for-profit, paying out that money to those shareholders is going to be very difficult, and therefore will reduce the ability or the willingness rather of the shareholders to invest in your company. Okay, so that's it for this week. Thanks for joining me. I look forward to seeing you guys again next week. Cheers.